Hey everyone, and welcome. Let's get ready to jump into one of the most important, and honestly, one of the most fascinating topics in public administration.
So glad you're here for our study group for PP 5340. We're diving into the readings for Section 4, which is all about social equity. We've got some really foundational text to get through, so let's just get right into it.
All right, here's our game plan for today. We're going to start with the basics. What even is social equity? Then, we'll dig into its philosophical roots with a look at justice theory. After that, we'll see how it all plays out in the real world, check out some modern challenges, and finally, we'll tie everything back to our future as public servants. Sound good? Let's go.
Okay, first things first. To really get a handle on social equity, you first have to understand what came before it. You know, what was the old way of thinking?
H. George Fredrickson, in his work New Public Administration, really lays this out perfectly. The classic model was all about the bottom line. It was obsessed with two questions. How can we be more efficient, and how can we save more money? It's kind of like a machine-like view of how government should work, just inputs and outputs.
But then, back in the late 1960s, a movement that Fredrickson called New Public Administration showed up and added a third, absolutely game-changing question. Does this service enhance social equity? You see, it's not enough for something to be well-managed. We have to ask well-managed for whom? Efficient for whom? That changes everything.
And to answer that for whom question, you have to understand the huge difference between equality and equity. Mary Guy and Sean McCandless give us a perfect example. Equality is giving every single student the exact same instruction. But equity is different. Equity recognizes that, say, a non-English speaking student might need extra help, like tutoring, to have a truly equivalent shot at success. It's all about fairness, not sameness.
So, where did this powerful idea of fairness even come from? Well, to get that, we need to take a little detour from practice into philosophy and look at the work of John Rawls. His book, A Theory of Justice, is pretty much the ethical backbone for the whole social equity movement.
Rawls came up with this brilliant thought experiment he called the veil of ignorance. Just imagine this. You're about to design a brand new society from scratch. The catch? You have no idea what your place in it will be. You don't know if you'll be rich or poor, healthy or sick, part of a majority group or a minority group. So, what kind of rules would you make then?
From behind that veil, Rawls says we'd all agree on two main principles. First, everyone gets the same basic freedoms. Easy enough, right? But the second one, and this is the big one, is that any inequalities that do exist have to be set up to give the greatest benefit to the least advantaged people. That right there is the core philosophical argument for why we should focus on those who've been left behind.
Okay, so that's the theory. Super interesting, but let's see how this actually plays out in the real world. How do we take this philosophical blueprint and turn it into actual public policy? Guy and McCandless call this applying the social equity lens.
And believe it or not, the courts were actually way ahead of administrators on this. Take Griggs v. Duke Power in 1971. The company required a high school diploma and certain aptitude test scores for better jobs, which ended up systematically screening out black applicants. Well, the Supreme Court stepped in and said, nope, a job requirement has to actually measure if a person can do the job, not just measure the person in the abstract.
And in the very same year, we get another huge case, Hawkins v. Town of Shaw. In Shaw, Mississippi, the town was providing basic stuff like paved streets and sewers to white neighborhoods, but not to black neighborhoods. The court found this was a clear violation of equal protection. You just can't tax everyone and then only provide services to some.
So these cases really set the stage. And today, public administrators use this social equity lens to look at all kinds of policies. We're trained to ask these tough questions. Who really benefits from our city's bus routes? Who gets left behind? Is our healthcare system built for people who can afford it or for everybody? Are we sticking our landfills and factories in the poorest communities? These are the essential questions we have to ask.
But look, the work is far from over. The world has gotten way more complicated since the 70s, and so have the challenges to social equity. And this brings us to the work of Philip Joss, and a really sharp critique from Kenneth Oldfield.
So, Philip Joss makes this great point, that today, government isn't just a top-down thing anymore. It's all about these complex networks, partnerships between public and private groups, community collaborations, you name it. And in this new governance world, he says, one of the most important ways to push for social equity is to focus on procedural fairness. Who gets a seat at the table? Are the discussions fair? How do we hold everyone accountable? Getting the process right is a modern administrator's superpower.
But are we even focused on the right things? Kenneth Oldfield comes in with this really powerful critique. He basically argues that even inside the social equity movement, there's a massive blind spot: social class. He says the field talks a lot about race and gender, which is crucial, but it has mostly ignored the huge impact of socioeconomic inequality.
To explain this, Oldfield brings in the work of the sociologist Pierre Bourdieu and his 3 forms of capital. First, there's the one we all know, financial capital, money. But then there's social capital, basically who you know, your network, your friends in high places. And finally, there's cultural capital, all that unspoken knowledge, the vocabulary, the experiences you get from your family that gives you a major leg up in school and your career. These are advantages you're just born with. Oldfield uses this killer analogy to make it all crystal clear. He calls it realistic monopoly. Imagine after the first game of Monopoly, the winner gets to keep all their properties and all their cash for the next round. Everybody else, they start over from scratch. Who's going to win the next game and the one after that? That's the compounding power of inherited advantage. It's a system that just keeps reproducing inequality, generation after generation. And this brings us right back to us here in this class. All of these theories and critiques, they aren't just for an exam. They have a direct impact on our education and our future careers, which is exactly what a recent article by Bruce McDonald and his colleagues is all about. That article, The Scholarship of Teaching and Learning in Public Administration, is basically about how we can best prepare us, you and me, to be effective, ethical, and equitable public servants. It admits the world is changing like crazy, and our education has to keep up so that we can go out there and actually tackle these messy, real-world issues of fairness and justice head-on.
And that leaves us with the final, and maybe the most important question from all our readings. This one comes right from H. George Fredrickson, who asks, if you, as a public servant, are told to carry out policies that you know will systematically benefit a few people at the expense of a whole lot of others, what is your responsibility? There is no easy answer to that, but thinking about it, wrestling with it, that's at the very heart of what it means to be a public servant. That's all for today. See you at the next study session.